coaching in organizations is
Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good everything. Lovely to see you everyone here and to hear you if you're listening to this later in the podcast. I'm Magda, CEO of Coacharya, and with me today is one of our lovely trainers and coaches, Pooja. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
And hello to everyone.
hello. So Pooja is a coach trainer with us, but she has, in addition to that, she has a rich background of working as a coach with many different hats, including working in organizations, which is why she is perfect for this particular session today around coaching in organizations or organizational coaching. And little internal pitch, if you're new to that, Pooja will be doing a 30-hour elective program on this very topic starting end of January, I want to say. So if you are something who either works in an organization as a coach, or you're a leader who coaches others, or you're a coach who's external to an org but is going to be or wants to work in organizations as a coach, that will be a great program for you, and you will learn a lot of what we're going to talk about today so that you can be an effective coach within companies. So we will, in the notes of this episode on YouTube and on our podcast, we'll add in a link to that program in case you want to consider that in early 2022. But for now, let's set some context. So for those of you who've been attending our webinars on a regular basis, especially lately, we've done actually quite a few that dabble in this organizational stuff. So they're all very different, but we've had leaders from corporations from different levels. We've had, change makers and internal coaches. And, just looking maybe from the outside, if you haven't participated in the webinars, it might seem like, oh my gosh, this again. But the reality is we all work. And if you don't work, I hope you're doing something very productive with your time, and I'm jealous. No, I love my job. We all have jobs, and we at Coacharya firmly believe that those jobs can be made happier, more productive, more enjoyable, more purposeful, and all those great things with coaching being in the mix. And a lot of companies recently have been coming to us because they're realizing that in this world that's changing so much, like it was changing already like crazy before, but with the last 2 years now, 18 months, everything's upside down. Organizations have had to adapt so quickly. Individuals in those organizations have had to adapt. People, imagine working in a company that formerly was open office plan with a cafeteria, how much your life has changed from that to this, but only for meetings even, right? Like you're on your own a lot. So there's been so much change that organizations are really looking for what are some ways that we can adapt to change? How can we build resilience for when the change inevitably comes? Because as we've realized, it can come fast and furious without any warning, and it could be the kind of change that nobody anticipated, as with the shift to remote work, for example. So coaching in organizations is more relevant now than it has ever been before, I think. So we, Coacharya, and you, the community, all of us coaches, we have a part to play in that. And what an exciting part to play, because we don't go into organizations and say, hey, do this and this. No, we go in there and we help you figure it out, which is pretty cool because it's very empowering, and it leaves the recipients of the coaching in charge of their own destiny, so to speak. So personally, I think it's pretty cool to have coaching involved in organizations, and we do it a lot at Coacharya, and Pooja does it a lot as her lovely self in the work that she does in the world. So that's my introduction. Pooja, why are we here today, do you think?
Wow. I think, Magda, first off, thank you so much for bringing me on and having this wonderful audience in front of us. So really looking forward to digging into this very passionate topic of organizational coaching with you. And I want to appreciate how beautifully you have encapsulated the entire spectrum of, what is organizational coaching, why, and even why the significance today. So you have very rightly said, pandemic has been our biggest teacher for the past 18 months. And for organizations that are now, who went from full-time in person into full-time remote to working out whether they continue to stay remote working or hybrid working. Now we are trying to figure out our new way of being and working. This is the most poignant time that we can introduce the modality of coaching. And why I say modality is because coaching, as we all would agree, is not the end goal. Coaching is a way that we do things, the way we show up. It's a way of being, right? And so pre-pandemic, we may have found ways that managers tell or organizations advise, and all of that used to be happening. But today, when the focus is on relationships and how do we create that sense of belonging when we are so virtual and across, this screen, how do we create that trust, that sense of belonging, not just in a one-on-one relationship, but organizationally? And what better way than coaching? So while I know that this entire room today appreciates the power of coaching, I think our purpose, you and mine, Magda, would be more to shift our perspective into that appreciation and power of coaching into what would be the impact organizationally, not just within a one-on-one relationship or within teams, but within the entire ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. So what you're talking about is building a coaching culture.
Yes, and I'll go a step further, because what happens when we use the word culture is that it feels like it's something beyond me. It's a culture. I step into it. I don't have responsibility. If it is a structure, it is created by the organization. So what I want to probably put in there is the word ecosystem as well, because I want us to take responsibility, whether we are internal coaches, whether we are leaders who are using a coaching approach and a coaching mindset, or we are external coaches or even consultants coming in for a project. Whoever we are not stepping into an organization's culture, but we are being part of that ecosystem. And as Coacharya believes, you need to be the change you want to see in the world. So whatever is the change you are going to project, you are going to walk, that is going to become the talk. That's going to become the ecosystem. So even taking a culture and shifting the culture into a coaching one.
So I'm going to read the quote. It's actually on the description of today's webinar, but I loved it. And it's from our good friend, David Clutterbuck. A coaching culture is one where the principles, beliefs, and mindsets driving people's behaviors in the workplace are deeply rooted in the discipline of coaching. It is a culture where people coach each other all the time as a natural part of meetings, reviews, and one-on-one discussions of all kinds. So that's where we're trying to get to. Awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I couldn't find a better quote. And so I will throw this out to everyone in the community. If you are able to get similar or as powerful quotes that, encapsulate the philosophy that we are driving to, please feel free to send it to us. We would love to include it. But this has so beautifully said that right from that one-on-one to the entire structure, to that entire culture, to that entire ecosystem, we need to impact beliefs. And you and I, and we know that coaching is the best way we can empower people to build that resilience. So I'll stop there and then say, I can just go on. Let's get more specific. Let's have some
Let's get more
questions.
specific. So, let's get specific, but I kind of want to, build from the large definitional thing, which we already have, and kind of get down to go down the pyramid, up the pyramid, whatever you want to say, up the funnel, down the funnel. So for me, kind of the next step that I'm thinking about is, okay, so we know what a coaching culture or coaching ecosystem is. And with this definition from David Clutterbuck, we kind of know what are the different components where it can manifest itself. But why a coaching culture? I mean, at the end of the day, all companies have hierarchies, they have specialists, they have, managers and people reporting to those managers. So isn't it better if a manager just tells you what to do all the time and you just roll up your sleeves and do it?
That's a very good question, because at the end of the day, relationships are what matter. And we have so much of data, whether it is Deloitte's or McKinsey's or PwC's, telling us that productivity is based on relationships. It isn't just about skills and output. It is what happens in between. And relationships are most impacted through coaching, because it is about empowering and it is about enabling people. If a leader is able to bring the employee to where they are wanting to go, they don't even need to tell, because then they know that the employee is self-propelling, is enabled and self-empowered. So I would say that at the end of the day, it is relationships that matter. Organizations who believe that it is the structure that matters are not the ones that have survived this pandemic. The ones that have survived, and I'll bring back that in 2016, pre-pandemic, PwC had done a global research on, so 55% of the global CEOs said that trust is the basis of an organization's growth. And trust is about relationships. It isn't about a structure, right? So coaching, one of our competencies in coaching is trust and safety. So what better, way to impact an organization than through coaching?
Okay, so trust being the metric, it happens through relationships, and coaching helps build those relationships. But how do you measure trust?
And that's a brilliant question. So I'm very excited to say that some of my work that I've been doing in my full-time job here has been around building trust. And so what I'm excited about is to really bring that kind of way of capturing, like a metric, like an analytics around trust. So trust is more like an axis. There is an x-axis around skills and behaviors, because it is not just the competence of a person that builds trust and authority, but it is the modeling. When a leader, just think about it, if we are all to think back on what, I'm just hearing someone say, I'm just reading, can I be louder? Okay, I shall be louder.
Pooja, I think you're actually fine. Because I can hear you really well. So I would just advise to maybe turn up your volume, sorry. Because okay. I think it's an internet issue. I think you're loud and clear.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, so going back to trust, there are certain areas, and of course, dependent on every organization, that we can capture how trust is measured. There are two aspects. If you look at it, there is trust and there's trustworthiness. Do I trust? And what is the trustworthiness of the other person that I'm working with? Again, based on a relationship. Then there is an axis around the skills and the competence, the behavior of the person. So we'll start noticing that to capture what trust is, we need to have all of these in place. So you take a leader-employee, for example, conversation. Employee is able to trust when the leader demonstrates trustworthiness. And that is not just about their authenticity, their honesty, their transparency, their accountability, but it is also about their skills. Are they the experts in their area of work? So these are the two things that inspire trust. And how is it that we show up to reciprocate that? So all of this together will then become some of the metrics that have to get captured to determine trust. And that will be something that I would love to work on with a couple of, whoever is interested in, and figuring out how do we do that specifically with every organization, because every organization is different, just like every human being is different. And that's the beauty. Again, I come down to, that's the beauty of coaching. You talked about that pyramid, go up and down. So I am scaling up and down. It comes back to coaching, relationship, and trust. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no, because that just makes me have more questions. The trustworthiness is something that just came out, really hit me in the face a little bit, because you're right. It's not just authenticity. It's how do you walk the talk, so to speak, right? Can you give us some examples maybe of kind of how a leader can demonstrate trustworthiness?
Oh, what a powerful question. Magda, you have opened a whole Pandora of work that needs to be done on the courageousness of a leader. And the word courage comes from the word heart, right? And that's where the trust lies. Because when a leader shows vulnerability, when the leader shows the courage, that's what inspires the trust. And how do leaders demonstrate that? Not vulnerability as in crying in the room that, oh my God, budgets are bad, people are going to get laid off, oh my God, I'm so sorry, and tears. That's not vulnerability, but vulnerability is really speaking from the heart, and which touches the others. So talking about how do you create that space of vulnerability that a leader leads, and that the ecosystem of an organization demonstrates as part of its performance and accountability structures, that brings forth the trustworthiness. So I think you have hit the nail on the head, Magda, by saying that it needs to begin somewhere. Do I trust my leader, or does the leader inspire the trust in me, which is the trustworthiness? So some of the biggest qualities would be the courage, the daring. So work around fearlessness, and of course, Brené Brown's work as well. So all of this comes into that work.
Gosh, my head is exploding. I definitely want to work with you on that if you'll have me, because it's such an important thing, and it's actually come up quite a bit, like I said, recently in corporate work that we are doing at Coacharya. And organizational coaching, it's such a big thing, right? In the beginning, we talked about the audiences, right? We have coaches who work as coaches internally. We have coaches like you and me who might go into an organization and coach others. And we have leaders who act as coaches or have the hat of a coach. So even just in the role of coach, there's a bunch of different actors. Then when we talk about the coaching culture and, going back to David Clutterbuck's quote, it's really about the behaviors and about consistency and about having that throughout the organization and throughout all the levels, not just the internal coach or the leader coach or the outside consultant coach. So it's a tall task, right? Even doesn't matter what size organization it is, like it's not here's some stuff you can watch and think about, and all of a sudden you know how to be trustworthy and how to be courageous and how to be vulnerable and how to be having a coach-like approach. So where do you start? Like, let's maybe, I know there's no one size fits all answer, but in your role and in your life, as well as your life as a Coacharya person, how do you approach working with an organization that comes to you and says, listen, like, something's not working. We know that trust is low, and we understand that all these things contribute to increasing trust, but like, we don't know even what to do. Like, where do you start?
That's a very good question. So I think the best place to start is with the person or the point person that brings up that question, because exploring where that is coming from will start leading, it's like that water leakage, that it may show up somewhere, but it is really about where it begins. And we will notice that it's something that we always say, there is always a top-down approach, that it begins from the top. I know that there is a pull and a push force in this world, but it is how the leader sets the tone. And how do leaders set the tone? Someone was asking the question around how do you even demonstrate vulnerability? In our coaching programs, we demonstrate, we start working. And you rightly said, Magda, so I'm shifting into, it isn't something about learned behavior. It isn't something about what you learn, knowledge, and read. It is something you practice. And trust, vulnerability, and empathy is something that you got to practice. Oh, I empathize with someone does not create empathy. It is how we are having that conversation. So to your question, where does it begin? I think it begins from the top. So any change that needs to happen, we need to first have the top brass of the organization championing that change. So that's where I would say it would need to start. I can see that we are having a gushing flow of questions, Magda.
So yeah, let's take a look at some of the questions. Where are we? Okay, so here's a question I like. A leader is a coach, a mentor, and an influencer. Yep. How much of an EQ is important? So emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. How is it important to perform an organizational coach hat? And how do you know when to put on the coach hat when you're a leader?
That question is a great one and not easily answered, because I think it requires a lot of work. And that's the beauty of the practitioner leader as a practitioner coach, to understand that they do have a business outcome. They need to get certain work done, but what is the best approach? So how do it's like a batter. The batter needs to be coaching, whereas the substance is the business outcome. And that's probably the easiest analogy I could give for a leader to be conscious that when they have an intention, if they have an agenda getting into the room, how might they approach it in a way that they create a sense of belonging for the team or the individual or the audience? And the way that they communicate it will bring that about. That communication has to be a coaching communication. So the curiosity, the listening, and we talk about it as generative listening, that what are they listening, and then, changing their approach to enabling people to understand where they're coming from. Right? So I would say that the best answer would be the outcome is very important. You cannot have, let me give you an example. If you're having a performance conversation and the employee is going to tell you that, yes, a leader can never become just a coach. Absolutely. Because continuing with my example, that when you have a performance conversation happening and you have an employee who says, I want to do more, and this is my work, but this is what my interests are. And if the leader puts on simply a coaching hat and says, so tell me, what is it you would like to do? What would your job description look like? That is a pure coaching approach. And as we know, a leader cannot and should not be doing that. It is more about considering these are your interests. What would it look like doing it within the parameters of this job? These are some of the projects that I may have on hand. This is great to know that if this is your interest, the next time I hear a project of this kind, I shall keep you in mind and get you on it. So, for a leader, it isn't simply being a coach, but there are different competencies for leader as coach because we say coaching mindset. We cannot say that a leader becomes a coach. The leader as a coach, and then there is a coach. So that becomes the ecosystem for changing that relationship. You need a coach, but you also need leader as coach, and you need an employee who is ready to be coached and who comes in with that open-mindedness of doing that win-win situation. Does that make
And an
sense?
employee can only get there if there is trust in the organization and the leader is vulnerable. Yeah, so it all ties together. You know what, Pooja, what I'm thinking now is, when I first got into this coaching thing, two things kept jumping up as phrases, and it took me a while to get them. One was that being a coach is being childlike because of the curiosity and the generativeness of the conversations. Children don't have all the baggage that they bring into everything they do. They're just there. They're in the moment. So that's one thing. And the second thing that kept coming up was that coaching is like a dance between the client and the coach. And both of those things are kind of jumping into my mind right now as you're talking, because it's like, it does not sound like it's easy to be the leader with a coaching mindset, or the leader, as a coach. It sounds like, it's that dance that's a bit more complex because you have those different hats to wear. You're not just the coach. You want to have that curiosity and the generative thinking of a coach, but you have the responsibilities as well of being a leader, of being responsible for a team, for performance, for metrics. So it just doesn't sound like it's easy. It sounds like it's a lot of work. And as coaches, a lot of people say that they are coaches because I don't know why, but the reality is anyone can become a coach. We firmly believe that at Coacharya, but you do need to understand the principles, the competencies, and you need to practice them in order to become that good coach that can be of service to your clients. So minimum training that we do towards a credential is 60 hours. At Coacharya, we always kind of aim high. So we say that 30 hours is about of training, if you're practicing as well, is about when you are able to have true coaching conversations with you as a coach. Happy days, awesome. That's when you are dedicated to being a coach. When you're a leader with all these different things that you have to do, I'm guessing there aren't a lot of people who'll be like, oh yeah, sign me up for, 3 hours a week for 20 weeks plus coaching practice and reading, and I'm going to be the great leader as coach as there can be. What can leaders do to learn this coaching approach? I mean, we have programs at Coacharya about it. I don't want to turn this into a pitch. I'm just asking you from the perspective of a person who's worked with leaders and who's been a leader. How do you bring in that coaching approach, even in small pieces, to your leadership?
So I'm going to use, first off, I want to acknowledge that powerful metaphor that you used about a dance. And what better way to, to signify a leader as a coach. So think about that dance for a minute, where a tango, where you have a leader leading the dance, and without the employee knowing that there is music. So the leader creates music, the leader starts leading, and before you know it, the employee and leader have traveled the dance floor. doesn't that happen? And that is the beautiful analogy, the metaphor that you took about dance. Coming back from that into what can leaders do, I think the easiest way in such a small snippet of time is to say, to start with self-awareness. When a leader begins with, and what's jumping up at me is the work that around clear leadership that Jervis Bush has done on the experience cube. And I will encourage leaders to create some self-awareness around that. What is happening for them? What are the fears that they are experiencing? What are the thoughts they are having? What are they noticing? So all these, and what are they finally wanting out of a conversation, out of a year of performance? So where a leader needs to begin is self-awareness, and then the appreciation that the person in front of them is just like them, a person who, if you shift the relationship, a leader is also reporting to someone. So a leader is also an employee. And that is the awareness that a leader needs to probably begin with. So if we are to have a 1-point beginning, maybe I would say that the first point is self-awareness.
Which is also what we learn in coach training. It's I'm smiling ear to ear because so when we do work with organizations, especially kind of action learning stuff, when we talk about, taking a group and forming it into a team, the first thing that we do is kind of a workshop that doesn't sound much like work or more like or like coaching, because it's about kind of getting the vulnerability out and sharing the humanness of each other. Your hero's journey of how you got there, your, I don't know, story of your favorite pet, whatever it is, just like something to help each other see that we are all humans. And once we can interact on that level, the other levels become more easy to build on, so to speak. So yeah, just going back to the whole vulnerability thing, and we're all human, I suppose.
And Magda, you say that as usual very eloquently, because if you even take it that when we are human, we do come with skills and we do come with resilience. It isn't that we built resilience from scratch as a child to today. We do have innate resilience. So when a leader starts becoming self-aware and aware that the person that they are talking to has some innate skills and a talent and strength and resilience that they come with, if there is that curiosity, they may be surprised at what they have in front of them, because they don't have just a job description that they are talking to. They don't just have that role. They have a person behind that role. And they may surprise themselves that they never knew about the strengths in the room because they were never curious. They converted people into robots and machines, right? So you want to convert people back to people.
Yeah. You mentioned in the beginning, relationships are at the core of all of this, right?
Yeah. So it would be great in organizational coaching. So let's take that overview where we begin from at every, you set up structures. Every ecosystem needs to have structures, but behind the structure, the purpose is impacting a relationship. So people lead to productivity lead to results. And it isn't work that leads to results. And I think that's the shift that coaching will, within organizations, start bringing. And we need to see that ecosystem. So when we support, and you talked about, so I want to take a minute more to say that there is a power in having that basis of 60 hours and 125 hours of understanding of what coaching is. Because if we don't have that foundation to add on how a leader shifts their hat between the manager, the coach, and the leader, it is impossible. So we need those foundations. that we do through Coacharya, and then bring internal coaches, external and leaders, and then enable them to now transform that understanding into how will you tap in, tap out. It's a dance, like you rightly said. How do you tap in, tap out?
So Pooja, there are some questions which I'll get to in a second, and everyone who is on the live call, please add those questions in the chat. And what if we don't answer them, I will definitely give them to Pooja later so she can put them in a blog post on our website, and also the various models and theories and things that she's referred to throughout this episode. I keep saying episode because I'm thinking of this being a podcast later. Throughout this webinar, this conversation.
May I interrupt by saying, or I will invite them into this 30-hour space where we will discover it together.
Definitely. You guys, everyone's always invited to take part in our training programs. Of course, we want you there. But I'm saying, like, we'll add the references as well, so you can read them on your own. So I have a couple of questions, and we have 20 minutes left, so plenty of time. But I want to talk about measures. I know we talked about at the very beginning about, trust and how that's something you want to develop. How do you measure that? Great, awesome, happy days. That's the future. Today is not the future. Today is reality. And what's great is that the world is waking up to coaching. It's wonderful that organizations are waking up to coaching. But, the reality is that many organizations don't know necessarily what coaching really is, or they think it's a Band-Aid, or they love it and want it, but at the end of the day, they have to justify the spend for coaching, right? There's many different forces at work here. So I'm wondering, when you go to an organization, and I know every organization is different, so big grain of salt here. Are there specific metrics that you look at, or are there specific assessments that help a coach look at what is the status quo in the organization, and then, at a certain point in time, see how coaching is making a difference? Like, how do you arrive at those metrics?
Wow, that's a big one, because adding this to your previous question, where do you even begin? That figuring out the status quo what I am envisioning is right now, what is the biggest pain point? And as in any coaching conversation, what will a successful intervention even look like? Those two questions will start building out what the ROI and the ROE needs to look like. Because in coaching, the impact of coaching does not only happen in real time, but the real impact is seen after coaching project has been completed and when it is ongoing. You start seeing a multiplier effect. Even in a one-on-one, you notice, okay, there's an aha right now, but how it transforms the person is multifold times later. So I will say that there is an ROI in the real time, and then there is an ROE that they will see over a period of a couple of years. But what needs to begin is, where is the biggest impact of change that is required? And that becomes the skill of the coach or a group of coaches to go in and do some work around that and figure out with the client, which could be a leader or a group of leaders, including their HR, as to what would the impact need to be. And that, I would say, is very, very important as an assessment, because it isn't what you as a consultant want it to look like, but it is what the organization wants it to be. And at that point, based on whether it is about the engagement of the people, whether it is a change system that they are bringing about, or whether it is a structural change that they are wanting to have. So there are different changes. We need to have different kinds of assessments.
Okay.
and figure out the status quo to be able to then, through a conversation, know what this needs to look like. I think that's a piece that many a times we kind of miss out. We know it's easier to figure out what is happening, but it isn't as easy to figure out where are we going with this. What is even possible in what the time span that we have.
So someone had asked in the chat, what do you do if your organization uses language that still frames coaching as a punishment, or not as a punishment? I shouldn't say that because that's not what they said. As a way to address a problem. So in many, 10 years ago, even not even 10 years ago, less than that, coaching was either a reward or a punishment. That's what it was, right? You're doing something really great. Oh, have some coaching. Or you suck at your job, have some coaching, they can help fix you. So some organizations still think in that way. And even if it's not that extreme, the definition of what coaching is and what impact it can have is going to be different organization to organization, leader to leader. So if someone's in this audience right now and they have a team and they want to increase trust, they subscribe to everything we're talking about, but they have that practical obstacle of, I have to then go to my manager or to my HR and I need to ask for some money for training for my team or for myself, or to bring an external coach. How do I justify that? How can we help people who want us to help them help themselves?
Yeah. It's so from performance management, coaching is not about performance managing a person, but it is about performance enhancement. It is about productivity. So leaders who know that productivity and enhancement is a way to manage, they are the ones who will be able to put up a case and a proposal for the monies required in order to do it. In fact, it needs to begin from themselves, because a leader is very powerful. I think leaders are leaders because they are so good in what they do. And so they need to first have the coaching approach. When you feel it, and when you have been coached, when you know what that looks like, you will be the best champion for that proposal. So I would recommend every leader who is curious and is wanting to put a proposal for coaching needs to first get coached, and first needs to be open about what that impact looks like. That's the first thing. They got to feel it. In our coaching programs, we always say that if you want to train as a coach, have you been coached? Have you ever been a coachee, a client before? Because if you don't feel it, you don't know it. So that, I would say, is one of the ingredients. And second, it is performance enhancement and sustainable performance enhancement. That may be biased thinking. That caught my attention. What was that question? Right? That biases, that is something that I get focused on. So what are biases? Biases are not always, the bad. Biases can also be the positives. A positive bias can be very empowering. So biases, by their very nature, a bias about bias is that it is a negative bias. So I would say that, yeah, that's yes, and we are all very biased, because if we aren't, we don't have, it is our thinking. Nothing is right or wrong. It is thinking that makes it so. So, and the moment we think, we come with a bias, we come with a belief, we come with, so that's that entire ladder of inference that I'm talking about. But having said that, to create a proposal, it needs to be in the positive. It needs to be future focused for coaching to have its rightful impact. It isn't about setting something right. It is making things better. And making things better is not about glass half empty. It is about glass half full. Even when a person is not performing, if you pay attention to their strengths and develop their strengths rather than erase their weaknesses. The more you spend time on erasing people's weaknesses, the more you are being unproductive. You pay attention to people's strengths, their weaknesses will always get taken care of. So
Love it,
strength,
love it, love it.
yeah, good.
And speaking of strengths and building strengths, I was just looking at the description again, and like I really like the last question we put in there. And how does coaching help develop team spirit through a shared mission? Because we started off talking about this is a culture shift, right? It's instilling a coaching culture, and it can't just be done in little pieces here and there. But once you have a coaching culture, it does manifest throughout the organization. And you do feel it. I've been through it. I hope at Coacharya, if anybody from my team is on the audience for listening later, I really, really hope that we have that culture. I think we do. If we don't, let's talk, because wow, that would be a big fail. But I think we're good. So, you never know. I have to ask. I wouldn't be a good leader if I didn't. So let's talk about that. How does coaching create that team spirit around a shared mission?
Oh, it absolutely does. So the question for all of us who are so sold to coaching, coaching begins by bringing that awareness. Your question brings in the appreciative inquiry for me, that it is about dreaming together. It is that shared vision, and shared vision is the individual values, beliefs, dreams, and it is the organizational vision as well. So how do each person's values together with the organizational value merge? And globally, again, going back to the word ecosystem, it does come together. Ancient wisdom that Coacharya's work is based on is about the global oneness. And that's where that dreaming needs to happen. And coaching is all about the what. What is coming up? What do you believe in? And bringing that dreaming and then the co-designing and the co-creating together. So I know, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, because to me, it is a given that you bring the modality of coaching into the mix and you have a shared vision. You have shared responsibility, accountability, and results.
Cool. Thanks, Pooja.
We are done. Our purpose is done.
I thought the webinar was finished when I did the definition in the beginning, but just teasing. Oh my gosh. This is a big subject. I never want these webinars to become a sales pitch, but I think a little bit I want it today because this is such a big space. And, as we can see in the chat, there's a lot of people in our audience who do this kind of work, and that's awesome. And it's always lovely to see a lively debate in the chat. And there are plenty of others who have, a lot to learn and a lot to share with the rest of us. So I do encourage you to check out Pooja's 30-hour program that's starting in January. And it's all about this organizational coaching and going into everything we talked about today and more through theories and through case studies and, through the breadth of possibilities. Because each organization is going to be a little bit different, but the commonalities are definitely there. And I think, the more I learn about coaching, and forget organizational, in any aspect, the more I learn about it, the more it's obvious to me that we are all more alike than we are different. And of course, we're all special, of course, but there are commonalities that we should celebrate and leverage, frankly, to build upon, both as individuals, but organizations as well. And, our company culture at Coacharya is very different to, across the street, there's a construction company. we're separated by 100 meters, but they're different, and that's okay. But I bet you that when it comes down to it, if I were to talk to their CEO, there's gonna be some stuff where we're both like, oh yeah, I went through that, or oh yeah, like when we did this, like these things don't make your organization the same or boring or whatever. We all have issues, we all have problems, and we all have, I think coaching is not the silver bullet by any means, but it's a way to kind of surface those things that, especially the issues that we all end up experiencing at some point, around building trust, around vulnerability. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm philosophizing a little bit, but we have these similar conversations every time we talk to a potential corporate client. And I think there's something to it. So I, if anyone has additional kind of approaches that you've had success with in organizations, whether you're internal or external to it, please email me. I would love to keep this discussion going on our blog, or perhaps a future webinar, and perhaps Pooja's course, because there's so much to it. And I think there's more in common than not. Anyway, Pooja, that's my kind of parting words. We have 5 minutes left. I would love to say again.
May I, what you just said, I want to reiterate that would love a healthy debate, and would love for, the audience to join us as well. 30 hours we have to debate, to challenge, and to share, because the wisdom that we all bring helps to co-create. So it would be fantastic. And what I'm hoping that we'd work on real time projects. We get to even pilot these projects that you may be having in your mind with, that let me create a different world within my organizations. Come join me. Let's create a pilot, and off you go to try and, make that happen. So absolutely, we could do that. I also want to say that coaching in organizations is not about only getting people to agree to your own point of view. It could be agree to disagree. It could be to even help people understand where we are coming from, that your voice is heard, that when you feel heard, when you feel understood, probably 80% of your stress and your disengagement is taken care of. Sense of belonging is at least that I was understood, and my pain or my stress or my fear or my whatever was taken care of, because it's like, a dark room and light. The moment you're understood, it is light in a dark room.
I love that, and I 100% agree. Pooja, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening, for attending, for the discussion and the feedback.
Thank you.
We will see you here same time next week for our Masters in Coaching series. But something tells me that we're going to have a continuation of the discussion again, because it was useful, if nothing else. I think it was really useful. It makes me think a lot. So thank you everyone for attending. It's lovely to have you as part of our community. We wouldn't be doing these webinars without you. Just so you know, when I started 4 years ago, we did one webinar a month, and we had, I think, maybe like 30, 40 people who were attending, and it was great, and we loved it. And now we have them every single week, and there are hundreds of people attending and hundreds more watching later and listening to the podcast. And it's just lovely to see this community spirit, because together I think we are making coaching more known and accessible, which is pretty freaking cool. So thank you everyone for being here, and to everyone who is watching or listening later. We love you and we appreciate you, and we will see you here next time. Thanks everyone. Yes. And thanks, Pooja.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for the lovely questions, insightful questions. Have a great rest of the day, evening, wherever you all are.
Bye.